You're listening to the Cricket Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cricket Podcast, where we have some action between the old enemies as England take on Australia in a 5-match ODI series. We've also got some Test cricket as India are back in action and Sri Lanka take on New Zealand. I'm Jack Hope, and I'm joined by Max Rowe Brown. How are you doing, Max, on this cloudy Tuesday evening?
It is. It's cloudy. The rains have come to the UK, but they've somehow managed to avoid Durham at the end of September. So against all the odds, England are actually managing to play a game of cricket against Australia in the far north at this time of year. So well done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure on the last show I said that this one would be rained off. It actually looks like it's going to warm up to be a pretty good match. And so maybe it's a shame that we're recording with England needing 170 to win off 26 overs and 8 wickets in hand. Is that this could be the whole story of the series?
It could be. It's not what the professionals tend to do, is it? Just whack out a podcast in the middle of an exciting game. But you know, we have other stuff. I don't know. What are you doing this evening, Jack? You're off.
I'm going to see a Pedro Almodovar film
right,
as part of the Streatham Film Festival. And basically, I thought that the third match of a 5-match series in late September, well, you know, still think a bit pointless. And so I would rather be watching a Pedro Almodovar film in a cafe in Streatham than seeing what the denouement is. I mean, like, yeah, there'll be news that comes out of it. And maybe we can talk about whether the series actually is pointless and what could constitute good news from an England point of view over these 5 matches now that they are 2-0 down. But also, you know, maybe we'll talk about acknowledging the fact that the players themselves are literally saying that they don't care.
Yeah, well, hopefully your film has a good denouement as well.
Yeah. Me too. All About My Mother, if anyone is interested. That's what I'm going to see. Before we get into things, we need to give a shout out to the title sponsor for the show, Manscaped. You can head over to manscaped.com and get yourself 20% off plus free shipping. What do Manscaped sell, you ask? Well, the answer is a whole host of hair removal based products. You've got, well, everything. Max, what's your favourite?
My favourite is the good old classic. It's the Lawnmower 5.0. It's the bread and butter of Manscaped. It's where they started and it's where they've built from. And it's good kit. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, really sharpen you up. Just because we're heading into the winter months doesn't mean you don't need to take care of yourself below the belt. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, you're heading into the summer months. So even more reason, perhaps, to get yourself a lawnmower. Head over to Manscaped, use the code CricketPod for 20% off plus free shipping. Max, I'll briefly summarise what happened in the first 2 matches of this series. We'll talk England-Australia first, and maybe we'll do some Test cricket later in the show. First game in Nottingham Trent Bridge, England racked up 315, and it could have been a lot better. I think it's pretty fair to say at one point England were cruising along, I think 215-ish, about 100 runs short of where they ended up, 215 for 2. And then it all fell down in a little bit of a heap as they only added 100 runs across, I think, the last 30 overs of their innings, give or take. Might have been slightly fewer than, let's say 30. I meant 20 overs of the innings. 95 for Ben Duckett was a highlight, but I think it's pretty fair to say the innings petered out. And in response, Australia, and in particular Travis Head, cantered home, Head 154 of 129 balls. An innings somewhat reminiscent, you could say, at least in terms of match impact, to his World Cup final heroics. And it
always good to get a mention of that in there.
And fair enough to Travis. He played that innings and it was good. Australia, they win with 6 overs to go, 7 wickets in hand. Even Marnus Labuschagne gets in on the party, 77 off 61 for him. England answering some familiar questions about responsibility with the bat after that one. In the second match, Australia, they batted first this time. They got up to 270. And it was Alex Carey who was. I mean, a lot of people said a lot of really good things about this innings. I maybe not go as overboard as the general cricketing watching population. I was going to say star of the show. I would say something below star of the show. He batted well. He got 74 of 67. There's some history there. Some might see it as redemption. 270 is what it helped Australia to. Having said that, 270 probably should have been chaseable, and it turned out not to be for England as they were rolled for 202. The only England batter to do anything of note, Jamie Smith, he gets 49 off 61. And England end up 2-0 down. In the match that's ongoing, Australia have put up 304, and England are now 146 for 2, so very much in the balance, probably slightly in England's favour there, with Will Jacks and Harry Brook well set, both scoring over a run a ball. As I talk, Max, what are your main thoughts on the series so far?
There's been some good cricket. First of all, I've enjoyed it, which is surprising, I think, for me to say, because I wasn't all that hot on it coming into it. And as you alluded to at first, it's perhaps not the highlight of the cricketing calendar by any stretch of the imagination, but it's England against Australia, and it's two good sides, and it's a new look England with some people coming in, filling in injuries, people coming in, a new look batting order, borrowing some people from the Test side. It's anticipating the Brendan McCullum takeover of the white ball side. So there's some subplots, there's some little weaves of narrative in there. And ultimately, there's been some decent performances. I mean, that 154 from Travis Head was electric in that first game. Really impressive. But like you said, England let that slip. It was a good old-fashioned England collapse, really, from the point that they were at. And it was at the hands of Marnus Labuschagne, of all people. That was the bit that made it the most painful to endure, I think, was that from the position of 213 for 2, when Labuschagne got Ben Duckett with a horrible caught and bowled, and then managed to get both Harry Brook and Jofra Archer later on. But that's probably not the story. Travis Head chipped in with a wicket of Jacob Bethel. So it was a trial by part-time spin in the middle for those England batters, and they failed the test quite comprehensively. So it was disappointing because, you know, they'd shown some real promise, and, you know, a good 50 for Will Jacks, the 95 for Ben Duckett, like you said, and they didn't kick on like they should have done, and that allowed Australia to chase. It was a good deck, but 315 was well short at that point. I mean, they like to say, don't they, around 30 overs, if you've got wickets in hand, you can double the score. It gives you a rough idea of where you might end up, where you might be targeting ending up. And, you know, at that point, England were just shy of 200. So I think, and 400 probably felt, you know, a high 300 score was going to be chaseable, but difficult to chase in that deck. And England were very short of that. And that was disappointing from their point of view, especially when you look at the lineup that Australia put out for that first game. Sean of Mitchell Stark and Josh Hazlewood. You know, with all due respect to that side, Sean Abbott, Ben Dwarcius, and Aaron Hardy, I'm not looking at them as big weapons. And that kind of goes to show, because Matthew Short bowled 10 overs and Aaron Hardy bowled 6, and that was the most of the seamers in that game.
Yeah. Probably the big talking point that came out of the first game, and I mean, no disrespect to Travis Head, I mean, of cricketing terms, 150 in an ODI, that is the big talking point. But from an England perspective, and we are English, and so therefore that is the most important thing. Harry Brook was asked about the batting performance after the game, and he said, "We are out there to score runs. If you get caught somewhere on the boundary or in the field, then who cares?" There's a bit more to that quote. He goes on to say, "On another day that could go for 6, so I'm not too fussed." And I think he later on kind of revisited the care point and said, obviously we care, but if you get out trying to score runs, that's the way we want to play. So perhaps saying or admitting that it could have been careless words rather than an ethos of lackadaisicalism.
You got to be careful as well at this point, haven't you?
But
There's always someone waiting to jump on you and have a go at the way you approach the game in the English media.
Well, yeah, but it did. I mean, he did say though, who cares? And a few people, arguably rightly, did point out that maybe all the people that had taken time off work and paid £100 to go and watch the game cared.
Yeah.
Maybe people that appreciate the rivalry between England and Australia cared. Maybe people that don't want international cricket to die, maybe they cared.
And not all of those wickets
England's
were people getting out trying to score runs and hit sixes. It was Ben Duckett and Harry Brook were both caught and bowled by Marnus Labuschagne. Like that's a lack of concentration and not applying a craft at the right time. There's a difference.
Well, quite. Yeah. Are you critical of Brook? Do you think Harry Brook has let himself down, let the side down, let England down?
It's like he's taken winter fuel payments away from the old people. I think we need to maybe chill out a bit about the way people, I guess, immediately after a game think about the way it went. Ultimately, he's kind of right to a degree. Like, who cares? There's some people who are paid to smack a ball around and they smacked it slightly to the wrong place. So I kind of sympathise in a way at this point. England are here and they're not preparing for a World Cup. There's a Champions Trophy next year, but it's kind of a journey of discovery. Harry Brook's captaining for the first time his national side. He captained a bit in the 100, obviously, but that's a new thing for England, so they're trying that out. We're getting word on the street that Ben Stokes might be open to a white ball return with Brendan McCullum in charge. That's probably the smallest surprise in the history of unretirements. So there's a lot of other stuff going on, and I think generally the point is maybe it's not that big a deal. I do take what you're saying about people who want to go and watch England play a game of cricket and win a game of cricket, but you also go into this knowing what the lay of the land is, and the lay of the land is England are putting out a reasonably inexperienced side. They've made much about the fact that Adil Rashid is the top run scorer in this England lineup over the last few days. So it's an England in transition, and they're trying things, and obviously they always want to go about their cricket in an aggressive and attacking way. So you do have to bear that in mind a little bit, I think. But with that, you do need to win games of cricket, and they were in a position to do so, and they bottled it, and that was their fault. So criticism deserved, but also, chill out.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a bigger question here over the two matches about what direction England want to go in.
Yeah,
and actually, what is the strength of this team? I think my take on the series so far, and this is where the match that's ongoing, could well break the narrative either way. My take on the series so far is that kind of both sides of the ball, England are a team that are somewhat in transition.
Yeah.
It's not really clear who their best batters are. It's not really clear that all these batters are cut out for 50 over cricket. And on the bowling side, it's you struggle to look at that bowling lineup and say those are the guys who are the weapons. Maybe you take Adil Rashid out of that and you say there's 200 ODI wickets of proof that guy is a weapon in ODI cricket. Averages 32. I mean, like he's taking nearly 2 wickets a game, basically. So maybe you let him off. you look at the other guys, and I would include Jofra Archer in this as well, because we still don't really know where he is on in terms of his comeback and what his ceiling as a returning cricketer might be. I look at that. I look at the guys that they played in this series, and I do think I'm not very scared of that bowling attack.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's missing a couple of players. Obviously, I think you'd have Mark Wood in there. That's your pace merchant, but he's not going to be around for that long, and we all know that he's not fit enough to. Well, he will always break down with something. Just the nature of the way he bowls and what he needs his body to do, he will get injured. So you're going to be without Mark Wood for a period of time, and then I mean you're right. I've been thinking about. I think Bryden Cass. You look at his stats in county cricket, and there's nothing in there that suggests he's going to be another level at the international stage. He's not a bad cricketer, but you don't look at that thinking, he's the man who's going to come and get us a wicket. Same with Matthew Potts. He's bowled tidily. I think you could say that about all of England's bowlers in this series. They bowled tidily, but like you say, the weapon. It's a good description. There's no point where you're looking at the guys who are going to make the breakthrough. You don't see the Australian batters looking troubled. They don't look like they're penetrative, and that's an issue for England, because you flip that round and you look at Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood coming in to open the bowling, and you think, those guys, they're going to keep it tight and they're going to take wickets. They will take wickets in the power play, and I don't get that sense with England. I think it's a fair reflection. But the other question is like, I mean, who is there? Are England not picking the right people, or are England just lacking the next generation of bowlers as far as we can tell? What's the story?
I think it's with ODI series especially. I think it's always quite hard to answer that, because you don't know who they would play in a match where they did care. And to go back to that care point, and this has been the same in ODI cricket for a long time. Probably at least a decade, probably more like 2 decades. It's quite rare that you see the best 5 to 7 bowlers that a team could put out play in a bilateral ODI series. You see it at World Cups. You probably will see it at the Champions Trophy, but I also kind of wouldn't be stunned if some of the teams were thinking about Test series either side. And I wouldn't be stunned if Mark Wood didn't play in England's Champions Trophy side, for instance. And that
with a home Test series against India in the offing.
That means you're kind of looking to snatch pieces of information from the other formats and from the kind of 1 or 2 appearances where you might see someone, maybe 3 appearances where you might see someone across a series like this. From an England point of view, you're kind of obviously hoping that Jofra Archer is returning figures that are better than things like 6 overs, 53 for none, but he isn't. And is that because we are at the beginning of a comeback trail, or is that because we probably won't see Jofra Archer returning the kind of figures that we think he probably could have been able to achieve when he first broke into the England team?
Certainly deserves some rope, though. So it's at least nice to see him back and bowling and hitting 90 miles an hour and the rest of it.
I fully agree with that. Matt Potts, are they playing him in this because they want a look at him with a view to the Champions Trophy, or are they thinking we would like to give you some exposure to some of the Australian cricketers you might play in an Ashes series next year? That may well be a consideration in his selection. The honest answer is, Max, I don't know. And then there's the whole other question here, or the whole other thing to unpick, which is that there isn't really a level below ODI cricket that England bowlers are playing that could give us a strong indication of who might suit this format as a 10-over bowler. I think we know with Matt Potts, and Matt Potts is a good example here. We know that he can do the first 10 to 15 overs of the game because that's actually quite similar to Test cricket. Like we have a sample size of him in Test cricket now, which suggests that he's actually pretty good when the ball's going to move around and he can hit a length. What's his other role? Where are you going to get his extra 4 overs from? We don't know that, and I don't know if he's played really enough this day cricket against high quality opposition to know that. So he's learning on the job to some extent, and England have been quite reluctant to even try him in another phase in the game. Then there's a sort of an array of spinners who, England are kind of happy to give the ball to for a few overs, but not beyond that. And then there are guys who we know are decent T20 cricket bowlers, or at least have something to offer in that space, and might be able to bowl towards the end of an ODI. But you might not want to throw a new ball to, because they might waste it. They might just not bowl enough Test match length balls to be a force up top. I think if England were in a do or die ODI tomorrow, Chris Wokes would be playing, for example.
Yeah,
that's quite a step back. So what have we learned here? I don't really know from an England perspective. Maybe on the batting side, we've learned that Duckett is showing that he could probably open the batting. I don't know what else really.
The England's one-day batting lineup's much better when Joe Root's in it.
I mean that's probably true.
Kind of goes without saying, but
250 plus scores. He's just out in the game that's on right now.
Precipitating England's collapse.
But he's got 250 plus scores. So that's a plus. Harry Brook is scoring some runs. That's okay. I quite like Jamie Smith as an ODI option. Yeah. I think based on how we have seen him in play in Test cricket, like that seems like it would translate quite well. People who are real format purists might not like that assumption, but I can't really see an argument against picking him. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what I'm not sure the visions come together. And I think the other thing that we're probably learning from this series is that England, even, let's assume that England are picking near their right team, or at least some of the players that should be in the team. We're probably looking at a situation where England are definitively not at the level of Australia. Australia have won 14 ODIs in a row. They're playing they could make that 15 ODIs in a row. They've beaten, I think, every major nation except South Africa in that time. They're a really good, borderline great team. They've obviously won a World Cup in that time as well. And frankly, it does look like they're quite a lot better than England. And
they've brought over a good side. That's I'm surprised by the quality of players that they brought. Like Mitchell Stark coming and playing. He's the kind of guy they often wrap up in cotton wool. Hazelwood as well. Obviously, there's no cum dog, but yeah, I mean, you've got pretty much the bones of what would be the first choice Australia team in that against an England team that, like you say, is sort of trying to find its feet. So, I mean, fair play to Australia for doing that in the first place.
It looks like a big gap. I mean, Josh Buttler will come back in for England. Does he close a 70-run deficit in the second match? Probably not. I mean, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong, but that's a big. So Josh Buttler in for what? It would either be Jamie Smith or it would be Phil Salt. Probably. Yeah. I don't see that margin of victory diminishes hugely. I mean, it's perfectly within Josh Buttler's capabilities to have single-handedly won that match. I understand that, but it was still a bit of a thumping. The first match, similarly, I think a little bit of a thumping there. Maybe that's the game where someone with a little bit more experience batting in those last 20 overs would have realised that 20 overs is quite a long time, and you don't need to score all your runs immediately. Maybe that makes a difference. But then Australia chased that so easily that you think had England got another 60, they'd probably have lost. Maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but another 40, I think they'd have lost. And then in the game today, I mean, yet to be determined the outcome. 133 required off 21 overs with 7 wickets in hand. That could kind of go either way, I think. England probably still favourites, but I don't know. I think there is some evidence, as I say, to speak to you right now, and England could win 3-2, and everyone could laugh. I think there is some evidence that England are quite a lot worse than Australia, and probably sitting comfortably in the second tier of nations in this format at the moment. And it's not particularly clear from what we've seen in this series so far that they have got a clear pathway to getting to Australia and India's level. And well, probably India, Australia, and South Africa are the big three at the moment, aren't they, in ODI cricket? You'd have, I guess, them down as the big ones. Now, having said all of that,
it's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on, though. I mean, I think the point you made earlier about the lack of 50-over cricket at the level below is a really important one because, like you say, that you don't then have a litmus test for who's coming through. Obviously, you've got white ball cricket all over the place in T20, and you can see you've got so much sample size data to work with in so many different tournaments. You can translate that. You can work out who's coming in. Red ball cricket. I mean, pretty much the way they pick people in the red ball cricket is: are you over 6 foot and can you bowl 90 miles an hour? That's one thing that they could try and translate to ODIs. But it's going to be interesting to see which they pick from, because before McCullum, it's been pretty much we're treating ODI cricket as an extended T20. Like, we're going to pick the people who are best at T20 and try making them play a long T20 with Joe Root in the middle to try and hold things together. That was essentially what they've been doing over the last 3 years, I suppose. It hasn't really worked. So it'll be interesting whether they then pivot that and go, well, we're trying to turn Test cricket into essentially a series of one-day internationals. And there's signs of them doing that with the batting, with bringing Ben Duckett in, bringing Jamie Smith in. So that's something to keep an eye on. But the bowling is where it's tricky, isn't it? Because, like you say, you've got very different phases to work with, and you have to, I guess, try and work out what the best proving ground is for those kinds of things. But I do feel that maybe there just isn't the talent quite there yet on the bowling side to fill in the gaps, because it's not been a great bowling side in the white ball series for England for years, has it? It's the batting that's done the damage, and the bowling has been adequate alongside that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say post England's World Cup win, that probably is the case. I think they had a much better bowling side in that World Cup than I think people give them credit for. Obviously,
still haven't replaced Liam Plunkett.
Obviously, Archer was very good, but yeah, Chris Wokes before and just after that World Cup was about as good as it gets in the power play. Took loads of wickets, and that's important in 50-over cricket. That's really important. And then Rashid and Plunkett in the middle. Has Adil Rashid been as good since then? Maybe. Plunkett hasn't played, and they haven't replaced him. Like, there is no. I'm not even sure they've really even tried.
No.
So, yeah, there is that. Max, anything else on this series that you wanted to talk about?
I think that's covered most of what. Most of what I've seen, really. Australia dominant, very impressive. England finding their feet, some good cricket. Let's move on to stuff that matters.
Cool. All right, we'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll talk England, Bangladesh touring India.